Your Creative Push, episode 20.
The world at large, it doesn't want you to do it, and I'm mad at that. I want to fight that.
Welcome to Your Creative Push, the podcast that pushes you to pursue your creative passions. I'm your host, Youngman Brown, and my guest today is Matthew G. Lewis, aka Lostkeep. Matthew is an artist whose work is both terrifying and beautiful and mesmerizing all at the same time. And I usually pull together like a special bio, but I want to read verbatim from his own bio on his website for you because it's awesome. Born in the Deep South, entangled in the kudzu of ignorance and fear, Matthew seemed destined for a lifetime of servitude and devotion. However, the devil had sanctified him for lower purposes. Our Lord Insubordinate used Matthew's years at Savannah College of Art and Design as a petri dish for culturing a blight of reason and suspicion that would soon wither Matthew's holy heart. Currently, Matthew festers away in Seattle, Washington, whilst conjuring images with his loathsome tools of pencil and brush. Matthew specializes in burdensome visual endeavors. And my favorite line, please email him if he can help. Matt, so give us a look into that.
So when I was a kid, I come from a very, like a Southern Baptist evangelical, fundamentalist evangelical background. This is the culture that I grew up in. I moved away from that as, I went to art school and eventually just moved away from it, got exposed to a lot of things outside of kind of the culture I was raised in. A lot of different ideas at art school, different people from a lot of different countries and that kind of thing. And I just kind of naturally moved away. I always mention this when people ask about that kind of switch in mentality. But it was really Reformed theology. So the stuff that like Martin Luther and John Calvin talked about alongside psychology class that really kind of moved my worldview into a different way.
Sure.
Essentially, that's what happened.
How did that kind of upbringing, how does that come into your art?
Like growing up in church and sitting there, every Sunday, I was pretty fascinated with the book of Revelation and kind of all the heavy, dark imagery you can find there. Mm-hmm. And even though I ideally should have been focused more on things like grace and forgiveness and kind of the brighter side of things, I feel like I was just always fascinated with more of the darker side of things. And I felt that the imagery was more rich and challenging. I find that imagery kind of lends itself to being able to speak to more people and connect with more people, whereas I think my imagery is kind of on the extreme end of things, but some people talk in extremes, some people relate to extremes, and that's just where I naturally gravitate. And it's kind of the narrative I want to talk about, the story I want to tell. And I hate to say, I don't want to really say like circles I want to move in. That sounds kind of strange to me, but I feel comfortable there. I feel like that's where kind of I belong. So
yeah, there's like going along with what you're saying. There's like a prehistory to your work almost. It's like it's something familiar, and that's like scary almost. Like I think, like you said, a lot of people can relate to that, even if they don't want to admit it.
Yeah. Just in the past couple of years, I got kind of turned on to Joseph Campbell and those kind of writers and thinkers, and I really am fascinated with how a lot of the interconnectedness amongst a lot of different religions and the narrative that they tell, and how there's this amazing common story or common human story that's just everybody takes part in it. And I just think there's a wonderful way to connect with people using that. So yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, I'm glad it's showing up, that kind of prehistory and language. I want to do it better. I want to do it more as I continue to work. So
yeah, I'm staring at your artwork right now too. It's it's so mesmerizing. So when did you maybe take us back to like one of the first times that you like made one of these pieces, or like kind of a darker side of things, and was it well received? Did you share it with anybody, or like how did that happen?
That's a good question. So even when I was a kid, again, going back to kind of growing up in church and that kind of stuff, I was always drawing like angels fighting demons and like kind of morbid pictures of Jesus on the, hanging on a cross. And it wasn't for the sake of the violence and there was an aspect of, I guess, devotion to it. And I kind of felt that those are the only things I could draw. I loved comic books, video games, and that kind of stuff, but I always felt kind of guilty for liking those things because my religious upbringing and programming was so restrictive. And I found my outlet required me to fashion the stories I'd find in the Bible and stuff and make them violent, make them visually graphic. And so even as a kid, there was a picture I did for a guy, and it was this angel like ramming a sword up through like the devil's, like the underside of his chin up through the top of his head.
That's awesome.
If it was in a comic book, I had a problem with it, but if I drew it myself, then it was fine. So it's just this really strange conflict of interest, and the way that I resolved it was just really weird. But yeah, so even as a kid, it was always there. I had family members that saw my work and they said, yeah, I couldn't sleep that night after I looked at your work. So
that's great.
And I kind of smiled and liked it. So
is that the kind of impact that you still like try to get with your art?
There's a selfish kind of self-indulgent shock value that I like. I get a kick out of it, but there's a lot of people that have the same kind of upbringing and are maybe dealing with a lot of those issues and topics. And so I think I want to foster that more, that kind of genuine desire to connect and have a dialogue, and like even show that you're like people that have the same kind of upbringing and thing, they're not alone. So, as brutal as it is and can look, I'm very interested in how there could be maybe a healing or even a redeeming quality to it. So yeah, there's kind of both. I mean, I appreciate it when people kind of laugh at it or get shocked by it. And that's entertaining, and I appreciate it. But if I can do something a little bit more significant, I like to try to pursue that too.
And would you say that you still like kind of suffer from that guilt that you had when you were younger, like that guilt of, I don't know, I can relate because I still have guilt issues.
Oh,
like,
totally.
Just from my religious upbringing too. Like, do you still struggle with that?
Oh, totally. Yeah. It's
it never goes away, does it?
Yeah, it's kind of everything. I think it's everything. What does that mean? What I mean by that is it informs everything I do, I'd say, especially with the artwork, because I hope there's a level of catharsis, or I hope it's kind of cathartic, where I'm working out these things on paper or on a computer, however, visually. Yeah, it definitely shows up there. A lot of it is hidden. A lot of the banners where I have text and stuff, that's pretty personal stuff I don't really want to share yet. But it all calls back to personal struggles and kind of the mental struggles of like the guilt for not really being allowed to make mistakes as a kid. Just feeling that, any mistake you make, you can't recover from it. It echoes throughout eternity. So really, actually, I was thinking about this the other day, you really miss out on those wonderful aspects that a lot of religions offer of redemption and grace and forgiveness. And for me, it just got overshadowed with punishment and pain and denial and that kind of stuff. So
what advice would you give to somebody who has that as well?
Get out of your comfort zone. Talk to people that think the exact opposite of what you think. Listen to a lot of podcasts. Just find as many things that offer a different opinion as you can find. I think that was until I really got out of Alabama and went to school in Savannah, Georgia, which was a very international school. It was just a product of my environment. That's just all I was offered. That was kind of that very restrictive worldview was all I had around me. So, once I started talking to other people that didn't think like me and just started to learn a lot of patience, or more patience than I had before, and a lot of listening skills, things calmed down a lot once I started to listen.
When you listen to like you said, podcasts were big for me too, as far as like kind of finding out that there's like other real people, not real, I don't want to say real people, but people that like kind of are talking about things that you don't talk about with your friends or family or whatever. It's like, it's really interesting times that we live in because you can find connections with people that you never meet.
Yeah, totally. That's and I mean, a lot of it is realizing you're not alone, realizing that there's a lot of other people that are going through or have had the same struggles, and that's so key in kind of bringing some peace to for me it was, bringing more peace to my mind about finding my niche, my place in the world, my voice, and all that kind of stuff. I don't want to overblow where I'm at, but it's
Yeah.
it kind of sets you on the path. Yeah, it helps set you on the path and guide you, I think, or it did for me.
Going back to some of the things that kind of hold you back, what are some of your forms of resistance, like some of the things that hold you back? Like back then, you already mentioned some, and even today, like from doing your work.
Yeah, I'd say right now, a lot of the resistance is just logistics. I quit my job about a year ago. I was
Congratulations.
Thanks. It's interesting. Yeah, I was burned out. I was increasingly becoming just frustrated, and I've always had this freelance thing, this specific voice that I've always wanted to indulge and pursue and kind of train. And so, yeah, I quit my job and I started to pursue the freelance thing hardcore. And it was tough. I basically ran out of money, moved out of my apartment. When I moved to Seattle from Alabama, I worked in a hostel. And so I'm actually back in the hostel and working there and doing freelance work on the side. And it's actually a good setup for me. It's really allowing me to kind of culture that freelance side of things, make connections, actually have time to spend time on the work, which is key. I mean, just, having the full-time job before and really being drained after the day was over. I just had no creative energy to work on my own stuff, which I feel like is where my future really lies and what's really valuable. So yeah, I'd say just logistics, working out how to maximize time devoted to creating images that I'm enthusiastic about and I feel like people enjoy and want to see. Yeah.
I think a lot of people have, tuned in to what you said, because I think that's the goal. That's the goal for me, to eventually quit my job and find a way to make money with writing or, any type of creative endeavor. I think a lot of people have that too. And a full-time job, it just sucks everything out of you, doesn't it?
Yeah, it can. I know there's people that are better at handling their own pursuits and a full-time job. I learned a lot from leaving and trying to do freelance full-time. And it's just, it's jumping in. I just knew I had to jump right in and give it a go, give it the best shot that I could. And it's paying off. It's slow, but it's definitely paying off. I think a lot of illustrators specifically have a similar story. There's kind of a grind period, and then once you find your voice and once you make connections and have some exposure, things kind of, they start to turn around. Yeah, but I don't really have a lot of obligations. I'm kind of fortunate that way. I don't have a lot of people depending on me, so I can kind of indulge myself and pursue fairly singularly the things that I really want to pursue.
What advice would you give to somebody that doesn't necessarily want to pursue their art full time, that want to kind of just like add it in as a hobby and, kind of see where things go?
If you enjoy it, do it. And if you don't enjoy it, then don't do it. There's a million ways to be happy in life. Mm-hmm. And yeah, for me, I enjoy the struggle. I really, really enjoy making the imagery. And so, yeah, it's just, I can't stop. I can't stop doing this. I don't really want to stop. I don't want to look back and think, well, what would have happened if I had just kept going with this stuff? Yeah. I mean, if somebody enjoys, art as a hobby or writing or whatever creative output, then it's cool. I think being able to identify how things fit well within your life is great. If you want to enjoy your time here on Earth, then kind of realizing a balance or where things properly fit is pretty key.
Yeah, it's all about the balance, and that's one thing. This is like my 20th interview now, and that's one thing that everybody keeps going back to, it seems, is that they don't want to, the reason that they do what they do is they don't want to kind of be on their deathbed and looking back. They don't want to have that regret. And I guess it's just a matter of having the courage to go for it, you know?
Yeah, for sure. Again, I think my situation, it's a lot of my friends have said I'm making a sacrifice, but I don't, because I'm living in a hostel, and which is great. I mean, there's so many, great things about being here. But I just don't see it as a sacrifice. I mean, I really just, because I really enjoy making the imagery, and I feel like it's a thing I've cultivated for so long that to stop it now, I'd get to the end of my life and be like, what have I done? I totally missed this thing that I could have excelled at and really, created something good. I hope created something cool, spent my time well with.
Yeah, I agree. And what do you say to like the naysayers, like the people that kind of might scoff at like the type of art that you do? Because it's definitely not for everyone. And I know, like, the people listening here, like, I think a lot of people will relate to it. But what advice would you give to somebody who does something different or wants to do something different that's not necessarily like considered like a norm?
Yeah, I'd say so. The way that one of the things I repeated to myself was, I say, like, I'm not that unique, in that the thing that I think about, or the things that I think about, the subject matter, the content, and that there's other people that think about it too. And I think that's true for whatever you're into. If you're into ponies and daisies, or
I was gonna use ponies and I was gonna say unicorns and flowers, I think, but I decided not to.
Yeah, great minds think alike.
Yeah.
Or skulls wrapped in barbed wire or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
There's people that relate to that, and there's people that would enjoy having a dialogue. And yeah, I think not being afraid of one or the other, and not thinking less of one or the other. I mean, there's value in both of those subject matters. And if you paint pastoral scenes of happy times, then there's people that are going to enjoy it, and there's value in it. So, and if you paint on the opposite side of things, brutal and sad characters, there's going to be people that relate. So, and that's encouraging to me. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the big takeaway there is to find that community and to kind of immerse yourself in it, whatever it may be. Like, not only to create the work, but like just to have a better mindset and like find like-minded individuals so that you feel comfortable that way.
Yeah, absolutely. I know here in Seattle, there's a lot of art walks throughout the months. The different neighborhoods in the city will open up. All the businesses and galleries will have new art. They'll refresh the walls pretty much for the month. And you can go to different places and kind of find your vibe and your niche, and talk to people, make friends, find opportunities to show work, learn about other people's new work. That's like a real life example, but that can be done on the internet. That can be done anywhere. But you're absolutely right. Yeah, just jumping in with the people that kind of your kindred spirits or your tribe. It's a wonderful way to do it.
Find your tribe.
Yeah.
Can you take us back and tell us the story of, maybe, if you feel comfortable, like your worst moment or like one of your hardest times dealing with creativity?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's right now. So, it's you caught me at that specific moment in time. The past year, ever since I left my job, it's been both things. There's been a lot of great things that have happened. Made a lot of friends, made a lot of new connections. Professionally, there's been a lot of good things that have happened. But it's just been tough. The logistics of it, money, food, shelter, all those kind of things. It's been a lot of challenges there. Also, there's a lot of questions of, is it worth my time? Is it going to go anywhere? Yeah, all those kind of difficult things have come up. So yeah, I've wondered, how do I manage my time so I can devote the maximum amount of effort to developing the imagery, my own skill set, and the clients that may want to pay me for it.
Right.
Yeah, right now, pretty much.
And how are you pushing through it?
I just don't stop.
Don't stop.
Yeah, but one of the biggest helps was leaving the job that I had, so I could have the time to devote to this. And then the next thing was, another big help was moving back into the hostel, just because the overhead is so low, my responsibilities are so minimized. And it really allows me to have just a gigantic bulk of the day, devote to writing emails, making phone calls, doing taxes, even like forms and stuff like that, having that time.
All the fun stuff.
Yeah, all the fun stuff. And then, on top of all that, making the art, just totally digging in and basically excluding the entire world just to be able to think about the work and really make it good.
Yeah, well, you are making it good because it's incredible.
Thanks. Thank you. Yeah. Thanks so much.
Of course. You've already kind of touched on this, but what does art and creativity bring to your life?
It's definitely an outlet. Like I'd mentioned before, kind of getting a lot of those past experiences out of my head. I've found that I do a lot of writing and I won't censor myself. I'll just write all of these awful things that I think about on paper. And then once it's out, it's kind of, once I can see it and read back over it and kind of critique what I was thinking, it's just really, it's therapeutic. I'd heard people talk about writing your thoughts down on paper as a form of therapy before, and not until I tried it did I believe it. And that's very helpful. And I think the visual side of that is equally as valuable. That's what the creativity does for me.
Yeah, I can relate completely as a writer. Like once you kind of get your thoughts out there, it's not only is it good to just get it out, but it's also just super helpful to figure out what you actually think about a particular subject,
Oh yeah, definitely, for sure.
And also like just the writing it down, like not thinking about anything, that exercise is also fun too, because you're just like, whoa, why was I thinking that? It's
oh yeah,
it is like a form of therapy.
Oh yeah, totally. And like to be able to come back and think, oh God, that was silly, or I can't believe I thought that kind of stuff. It's really interesting to come back to your work and approach it when, like, sometimes when you draw something or when you write something, you play something, you could be feeling just totally angry and miserable at the time, and then maybe when you come back to it later, when you're happier, like you just hung out with friends or had some drinks or whatever, and you're in a good mood, and to come back and reevaluate things in that mindset, it's just really valuable to put things in perspective to help do that.
Yeah, it's strange. And the opposite's also true. Like if you find yourself in a crappy mood and you go back and read something that you've written, or I'm sure if you see something that you've drawn when you're in a happy mood, you're like, oh, like what was I, like this isn't me. Like it's interesting how your moods can change sometimes, like within the day.
Yeah, I would say so something interesting that's happened to me recently is I stopped drinking coffee. Yeah, I would go into these really wild manias in my head, just kind of thinking about, my situation and kind of how tough things were potentially, and, also having to make a lot of art, having a lot of clients that I had commitments to, and trying to fulfill all of those, also on top of working at the hostel and having social commitments here and all this kind of stuff. And so, yeah, I would have these really wild mood swings with coffee. Anyway, to jump forward a little bit, I eliminated drinking coffee about 4.5 weeks ago or so. Totally went to herbal teas, green teas, and black teas and stuff, and it's made a huge difference. Yeah, there's kind of a cool aspect to pounding a bunch of black coffee and then listening to some black metal and just kind of
going to work.
Yeah, art raging for the day.
Yeah.
But yeah, I kind of like this even keeled method a lot right now. It's not as draining and stressful.
Yeah, I try to stay away from coffee. I only drink caffeine when it's medicinally necessary.
Yeah.
When I need to stay up for my shift or whatever at work.
Sure.
Matt, who's your greatest inspiration?
It's kind of I thought a cool trend or an interesting trend to me, but a lot of the people that I draw inspiration from, all their last names start with the letter B. So
what?
Yeah. I just noticed this in the past year, but people like Brahm, the illustrator, he's definitely a huge inspiration for the quality of his work, his color palette, textures, and subject matter. There's a Polish artist by the name of Beksiński, and he does these amazing and detailed, just really macabre and horrific scenes. They're not necessarily gory, but they just have this wonderful, ominous, and overbearing tone to them. Clive Barker, the writer, he's the Hellraiser guy. I've read pretty decent amount of his literature, and kind of the content's really brutal. There's a lot of kind of BDSM, uh, body horror
Mm-hmm.
kind of stuff. So that's been cool. Francis Bacon, another painter, he's got some pretty stressful imagery, a lot of teeth, which I really like. And then one of my favorite writers, Algernon Blackwood, he's got this kind of I don't want to say his shtick, but the thing I really appreciate about the bulk of his writing is that there's this, what he even called a spiritual terror to it. H.P. Lovecraft said that Blackwood was one of his greatest influences, and Blackwood's critique of Lovecraft's work was that Lovecraft it's all physical horror, and the thing that's missing is there's no like spiritual aspect of it. And if you read both of their works, you can get the nuance to that and why you would say that. I mean, I like both of them, but Blackwood has this really wonderful, he sets these wonderful moods of just being at the mercy of the environment around you and oppressive kind of forces, and almost being in awe of those things that are against you or that you can't control. So that's probably a pretty good list of some major influences.
All the bees.
Yeah, all the bees.
That's awesome.
And a couple of my good friends, a couple of other illustrators, it's just kind of funny. Their last names start with B, and we've got some similar stories and some similar subject matters that we like. So
that's crazy. And yeah, I got to think if I have a specific letter. No, I don't know. That's interesting though. That has to mean something.
I feel like I'm hopefully in good company, especially with Algernon Blackwood. A lot of I read a short biography about him. He's kind of like a lot of artists, but him specifically, he had a lot of struggles at the beginning of his career, before he became an artist and before he really pursued writing. And then just all of a sudden he wrote this story. I think it was the John Silence. It's kind of this Sherlock Holmes spiritualist detective guy. He wrote those stories, and all of a sudden his career took off, and then everything was fine after that. He just kind of saw the success that he wanted. And there's some other little ways in which I feel like I'm very similar. I feel like my story is similar to his. I don't really want to go into those, but
yeah. It's interesting how you can, for whatever reason, there's always like that one artist or like writer or whatever that you feel like you can just like latch onto, like that you're like, this guy says exactly what I think, or like live the life that I live. It's very strange how that happens. Yeah.
And I think again that's where encouraging people to jump into their niche or into their specific interest and make those connections and find those inspirations and all that kind of stuff. That's that's where I found it. All those artists and writers, they all tackle pretty dark subject matter, and it wasn't until I kind of really jumped in and started digging around that I found kindred spirits and tribes people.
For sure. Yeah,
I'd really like to mention this podcast that actually was one of the big reasons that I quit my job. It's a podcast called Sidebar Nation, and it's done by these three guys in Atlanta, Georgia, and they're just big comic book fans. They interview illustrators, comic book artists, people in the movie industry. So artists like Eric Canetti, James Jean, Android Jones, a lot of folks like that, big and small, up and coming and established. And one of the interviews they did was with this guy named Jeffrey Allen Love. He's an illustrator, and his story is that he was kind of, I feel like I'm in a similar position now, or I was in a similar position. He was drawing hamburgers. He was drawing for some gig that he had. And at the same time, he had this cancer scare. To make a long story short, he looked down at he was drawing this hamburger, and he's like, why am I doing this? I could die tomorrow. The cancer scare turned out to be nothing. It was just a scare, and that was it. But he was like, why am I drawing these hamburgers? Maybe there's somebody out there that would, their lifetime goal is to draw hamburgers, but it's not me. I want to do robots and knights and arrows and cool stuff like that. So he just stopped, and he just wholeheartedly pursued his own personal vocabulary and vision. And he's having a lot of success now. And so I basically listened to that podcast, and then I quit the next day. So
wow.
Yeah, I'm still on good terms with everybody. It wasn't like I didn't burn bridges or anything like that. I'm not a fan of making that my habit at all. If I leave somewhere or anything like that, I want to go out with goodwill amongst everybody. So there's more benefit to that than burning bridges.
But still, the fact that an episode of a podcast could inspire you to the next day just to quit, that's pretty compelling.
Yeah, I still go back to that podcast every now and then and just re-listen to it. I've had the good fortune of meeting him in person, and I told him that, and he was like, "Oh man, how's that working out for you?" And I told him, I'm on the path. I wouldn't have it any other way.
Amazing.
Yeah, hearing stories about people who have had success with really just pursuing exactly what they want, that's been an insanely huge encouragement. So
cool. Hopefully we can inspire some people today. And with this podcast, that's the whole goal.
Yeah, for sure. Anybody that's got a drive to do these things, definitely, if that's just what you love, then definitely pursue it. Yeah, that's
cool. And
I hope my words are helpful.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think they are. And I'll be sure to link that specific episode up in the show notes page as well at yourcreativepush.com/lostkeep. All right, Matt, it's time for the final push. And this is where I ask you to reach through the microphone, grab the shoulder of one of the listeners that you've really inspired today that's thinking, wow, like, I didn't know other people like this, or wow, like, here's somebody who does exactly what he wants to do bravely, and kind of give them that final push to do their creative action.
Yeah, it's tough. It's definitely, there's a lot of resistance. I feel like the world at large, the way that things are set up, it doesn't want you to do it. And I'm mad at that. I don't want to accept that. I want to fight that. And I really want to make the images I want to make. So there's people out there that will help you. There's a lot of people that do want to see you succeed, but above all of that stuff, you just got to love it. Yeah. If you love it, just don't stop. Be persistent. Just don't stop. Be persistent. Just don't stop. I love it. Yeah. All right, Matt. You can find him on his website at lostkeep.com, or on Facebook. It's Lostkeep. Actually, everything pretty much is Lostkeep, right? Instagram, DeviantArt, Tumblr. Yeah, Twitter. There's a Dribble account. Behance. I really like Behance. There's a B again. Behance is really good. Oh yeah. Yeah, all those. It's pretty much, if you type in Matthew G. Lewis art, you do a search for that, or Lostkeep art on a search engine, pretty much all of my content comes up. Yeah, and going along with that, Behance and DeviantArt, I think, are like two really awesome places that, like, I don't think everybody really knows about, but like, they're a great community, and you can definitely find what you're interested in there artistically, I think. Would you agree? Oh, totally. Yeah. Yeah. I've connected with actually a lot of professionals that I've admired for many years. I've connected with them on Instagram. They've found me, I found them, and that's been pretty encouraging. So God, Instagram is a great community too, surprisingly enough. But yeah, Behance and DeviantArt, definitely. Cool. Yeah, I mean, that's how I found you too. Oh, cool. Yeah. So I guess Instagram's the way to go these days. All right. So you can check out all those links. Matt, thank you so much for coming on the show and giving us that push today. Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me. Wow. And that's why I love podcasting, because Matt was just the nicest dude. And it's not that you can't tell from looking at his work. Well, I guess you really can't tell from looking at his work, but being able to sit down with him for, half an hour and really hear his story and his mindset, you can totally understand where the art comes from then, and, what it means to him. And I think that's a huge lesson. I think a big fear that people have is they're scared that the art they create is going to be like a representation of who they are as a person. Like, if you wanted to draw or write about like violent scenes, that makes you a violent person, and that's not the case. And like, on the opposite side, if you're a dude maybe who wants to write, romantic novels or children's stories or something like that, but you're embarrassed about it, I think you should do it, because it's the thing that you want to do, and it's not necessarily like who you are. Of course, you should put yourself into everything you do, but that doesn't mean that you're defining yourself as that. So yeah, Matt draws some gnarly stuff, but he's a sweetheart. We talked at length after the interview about various things, and had a great conversation with him in that respect too. And he mentioned like his desire to help other people out. I think he described it as, walking down a path and, looking back at all the people behind you and yelling, "Hey, look out for that roadblock," And that's what he wants to do, because people did that for him.
And I just think that's such a good mentality to have. And, if everyone had that outlook, the world would be, a much better and easier to navigate place. So thank you so much, Matt. We really appreciate it. iTunes shoutouts real quick. Melinis said, such interesting story from creatives. I have a business podcast and I can see that creatives have similar challenges like negative mindset, fear of success, etc. We are no different on the inside, but the scenarios are just a bit more interesting in my humble opinion. Don Hutchinson said, start doing the work. I just listened to Youngman Brown's interview with Swedish artist Hjalmar Whalen, who shares highlights of his fascinating career and shares insights and strategies that will help listeners on their journeys. Fine show destined to grow and thrive. Bravo, Youngman. Sheena Yap Chan from Canada said, I am loving all the creativity in this podcast. It just shows what can be possible in your life. Keep it up. And Radio Chupa from Australia said, thanks so much for helping me push through. A great show to inspire my creativity. So thank you so much for all those ratings and reviews on iTunes. It's the single most important thing you can do to help out the show. Tomorrow on the show, we have Lisa Call.
I turned off the radio and I turned off the music and I turned off the books on tape on my drive home from work. And I spent the time driving home. I spent my commute time visualizing myself having a huge amount of energy and having the motivation and desire to work in my studio. So when I got home, I actually did. So I kind of visualized myself back in my studio again. And after about a 6 to 8 month break of being way too tired to go in there, I did it by visualizing it and just saying I could do it. And eventually it just worked. And I got back to work in my studio and I was able to come home from work and get back to work.
Lisa's a wonderful artist, and we had a great conversation about how to get the work done. So that's for you tomorrow, but for today, hopefully we have given you the push to go and get some work done. Have a great day, and I will see you tomorrow.